In the middle of the 18th century, the world was dominated by empires. Among them, the British Empire stood unrivaled. Its navy controlled the oceans, its trade reached every continent, and its flag flew over distant lands. Along the eastern edge of North America lay 13 British colonies, stretching from New Hampshire in the north to Georgia in the south. These colonies were prosperous, expanding, and deeply connected to Britain, but beneath the surface, tension was growing. The people of these colonies were not revolutionaries by nature. They considered themselves loyal British subjects. They spoke the same language, followed British laws, and cherished the rights they believed were guaranteed to all Englishmen. Yet life in America was different. Distance from Britain had fostered independence. Colonial assemblies governed local affairs, communities relied on themselves, and generations born in America began to see the land as their true home, not England. The turning point came after the French and Indian War, fought between 1754 and 1763. Britain emerged victorious, gaining vast territories in North America. But victory came at a heavy cost. The war left Britain deeply in debt, and Parliament believed the colonies should help pay for their own defense. New laws followed. The Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, and later the Townshend Acts imposed taxes directly on the colonists. To Parliament, these taxes were reasonable. To the colonists, they were an attack on liberty. The colonies had no representatives in Parliament, yet they were expected to obey its laws and pay its taxes. Across towns and cities, protests erupted. Merchants boycotted British goods. Crowds gathered in the streets. A powerful slogan spread from colony to colony: "No taxation without representation." Tensions intensified in Boston, where British soldiers were stationed to enforce imperial authority. Their presence angered residents and led to frequent clashes. On a cold night in March 1770, a confrontation between colonists and soldiers turned deadly. British troops fired into a crowd, killing 5 civilians. Though the incident was small, it was quickly named the Boston Massacre and used as propaganda to portray British rule as cruel and oppressive. For a brief moment, tensions eased. But in 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act, granting the British East India Company a monopoly on tea sales in the colonies. Many colonists saw this as another attempt to assert control. In response, a group of protesters boarded British ships in Boston Harbor and dumped hundreds of chests of tea into the water. The Boston Tea Party was an open act of defiance against the Crown. Britain reacted with force. Parliament passed the Coercive Acts, known in America as the Intolerable Acts. Boston Harbor was closed. Massachusetts lost much of its self-government. British authority tightened its grip. Instead of isolating Massachusetts, these actions united the colonies. Representatives from 12 colonies gathered in Philadelphia in 1774 at the First Continental Congress. Though they still hoped for reconciliation, they also began preparing for conflict. War arrived in the spring of 1775. British troops were ordered to march to Lexington and Concord to seize colonial weapons. Local militias made up of farmers and tradesmen stood ready. At dawn on April 19th, a shot was fired. No one knows who pulled the trigger, but the sound echoed across history. British forces were forced to retreat under constant fire from colonial fighters. The American Revolutionary War had begun. Soon after, colonial forces surrounded Boston. In June, fighting broke out at Bunker Hill. Though the British won the battle, they suffered heavy losses. It became clear that the colonists could fight, and that this war would not be easily won. As the conflict spread, colonial leaders faced a critical decision. Were they fighting only for their rights as British subjects or for full independence? In July 1776, the answer came. The Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. Written primarily by Thomas Jefferson, it declared that all men were created equal and possessed natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It announced that the colonies were no longer part of the British Empire. By signing the Declaration, the leaders committed an act of treason. There was no turning back. The war that followed was long and uncertain. The British Army was powerful, disciplined, and experienced. The Continental Army, led by George Washington, was poorly supplied and often unpaid. Soldiers lacked food, clothing, and weapons. Desertions were common. Yet Washington understood that survival was victory. He avoided decisive battles when possible, keeping his army intact. The winter of 1777 at Valley Forge tested the limits of endurance. Thousands suffered from cold, hunger, and disease. Yet discipline improved and the army emerged stronger. Victory at Saratoga later that year proved decisive. An entire British army surrendered, convincing France to openly support the American cause. French involvement transformed the war. Money, weapons, troops, and naval power flowed to the Americans. Spain and the Dutch Republic later joined the fight against Britain, turning the conflict into a global war. The war affected everyone. Families were divided between patriots and loyalists. Native American tribes were drawn into the fighting, often siding with Britain to resist colonial expansion. Enslaved Africans were promised freedom by both sides, though many were betrayed by those promises. After years of fighting, the final blow came in 1781 at Yorktown. British General Cornwallis was trapped by American and French forces. With no escape and no reinforcements, he surrendered. The war was effectively over. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris officially ended the conflict. Britain recognized the independence of the United States of America. From a group of colonies, a nation was born. The American Revolutionary War reshaped the world, inspiring future revolutions and redefining ideas of freedom, government, and human rights. It was not just a war for independence. It was the beginning of a new era in human history.